Good. Well, a very good afternoon to everybody in the room here at Downing College, and also to those of you joining us online for today's seminar. You're very welcome. My name is Frank Salmon. I'm the director of the Axon Johnson Centre for the Study of Classical Architecture here at Downing College, as I've said. And it's a great pleasure today to welcome John Outram as our visiting speaker. We always like in our seminar series to have somebody who's practicing architecture or perhaps an associated craft with architecture. John, you're our architect of the term today, and we couldn't be more pleased that you've agreed to come and talk to us about your life's work, I think. Outram at 90, we are discussing today. Now, I'm sure John doesn't need much introduction from me. He's an extremely well-known architect, indeed one of the great figures of postmodernism in this country. But I do have one anecdote, if I may be allowed to share it, John, which is that we met, well, perhaps not met wouldn't be the right word, but I was in the audience, put an annoying question to you at a conference in the 1990s at the Society of Architecture Historians of Great Britain. It was remarkable that you came and spoke there, in part because architects weren't interested in what we were doing as historians very much back then, and you were engaged, and in part as well because of what you said in answer to my question, because in your talk, you were mentioning a book that we both have in our libraries, I think, a book called Architectura Numismatica by Thomas Leverton Donaldson. It's a 19th century account of the way that ancient Greek and Roman architecture, especially Roman architecture, appears on coins and medals. And I said in my questions afterwards, you just mentioned this en passant, Mr. Outram, but how remarkable you'd have this book. And you said in reply, you won't remember, you said, oh, architects don't read books, we only look at the pictures. Now, I took that away and I've dined out on that story many, many times since. But I have to say, I don't believe your answer, or at least not in relation to your own case. I think there's been nobody been more thoughtful about the long history of architecture, classical architecture and its Egyptian roots, more than any other in the profession of architecture in the last half of the 20th century in this country. You'll be familiar with some of John's celebrated buildings, the new house at Wadhurst, now Grade 1 listed, of course, very close to where we are here in Cambridge, the Judge Business School, probably, I suppose, your largest work in the UK, along with the wonderful pumping station on the Isle of Dogs as well. And if, when you've heard John's lecture today, you want to know more about his wonderful career and work, you can buy either a book, I think, on New House by Mr. Musson, who's in the room, and also Geraint Franklin's big study published by Historic England a couple of years ago. So your legendary status is going before you in these published works, John. Now, one of the things we're going to hear about today, I'm going to imagine from the title of the lecture, the Ordine Roboticorum, is the remarkable way in which you, in your career, have sought to combine historic forms with modern technologies and modern functions and structures. But John, the floor is yours to tell us about Outram at 90 and what you'd like to share with us today. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Frank, for your kind introduction. I was brought forward by Jeremy Musson. Oh, there he is. Yes, okay, it's Jeremy. You're to blame for this. And Frank picked up, and Elizabeth Deans has we've been working with her. So I got a lot of slides to get through, and I think I should start really. I got this new laser pointer thing here. This is me at 90. I told Anna Gibb, who's a brilliant architect and also a brilliant draftsperson, I think is the correct term. I said I've got a defibrillator, plastic eyes, because I've had my cataract operation, and tin ears. So she made me into a robot called Joro, and this is the Roboticorum. I mean, I just thought very early on, Corbusier said, "Pour le tout, c'était facile, pas de tubes." No tubes, you see, no wires. But of course, I mean, Louis Kahn, who was very fashionable when I was a student, and still is, I hope, invented the servant column, but he never really quite went the whole hog, you know, and put a capital on it. That was my crime. So this is, Ileana said you must put this in to show that you also were doing high tech, because this, in the first slide, there's a dustbin full of high tech. So yeah, this is the Peter Cook wrote, this was the first time he'd ever seen. This is 1958, a high-tech building. Now, this is it's something of a reminiscence and something of a manifesto. So it says, for a building today to be modern, that is to bring the psychological future into the psychological present, it should have two things: an entablature, which I call a raft of reason, because I rename everything as well as draw it. So that's how I make it mine, and I hope everybody's. And a space of appearances. So this is what I did in the Judge Institute. Oh, what's happened? These ones, okay. So this is forward, is it? No, that's, oh, I can go backwards. Okay. So this is the basic meaning of Plato's dialectic, that it tends towards a vision, a disclosure, that it prepares the original vision. So thinking starts with a vision, and it should end with a vision. Understanding is a kind of vision. It's understanding. You stand under the entablature, actually. It's all in the words. The logos remains tied to vision. If speech separates itself from evidence, given an intuition, it degenerates into idle talk, which prevents seeing. Legin is rooted in seeing, oran. Now, I asked my dear daughter, who does Byzantine and Greek, etc., what horan was, and she says it's something to do with horizon. Anyway, I leave it to you clever people to understand horan. So this is my proposition to Cambridge. What this means for Cambridge is that for no other reason than the political, because we now have the eruption of the vision, of the visual. I mean, the reason Trump won, one of the reasons Trump won is his rallies were so much more real than advertisements placed by Kamala on the, who didn't have a vision, actually. It's very important to have a vision, you see. You can't just rely on statistics, you know, like Cambridge does. So Cambridge must master the third culture, you know, the two cultures. Well, there's also a third culture, which is most critical for the ontological, that of the eye. You believe what you see, the iconic medium. So this is the eye inside the mouth. The mouth is text, and the hand is pragma, is things. Oh, what's happening? Oh, there we go. Now this is the book which I have the most bits of torn paper in. It's a wonderful book about Alberti. I remember Gordana, after she left my office and went to work in the AA. She gave a lecture. Well, one of her first lectures was on Alberti, and I always remember her standing there and say, "Where to begin?" And I thought, begin in the middle, in media res. So anyway, this is a wonderful book. It's nothing to do with the practice of architecture, but it's to do with understanding. You see, for me, somebody once said to me, who'd been reading my Instagram, he said, "Do you mean to say you start your designs from meaning?" And I said, "Of course, that's what matters. You know, we've been living in a meaningless human life space deliberately because people are afraid of meaning. You know, they think it's going to turn you into a Nazi or a communist. So, but meaning is what matters. So anyway, this comes out of that book with Mark Jarzenbeck, who's a friend of mine. He's the sort of head emeritus, if you like, of history and theory at MIT. And he said pictura is of more consequence to civil society than edificatura. Edificatura is building. So what he's saying is decoration is more important than building to the culture of a place. Anyway, so this is the only place where I could write on the ceiling, write on the sky. This is Texas. You know, there are hungry people in Texas. They haven't got a lot. My house is older than the Battle of the Alamo. No, yes, it is. It's older than the Battle of the Alamo, and it's only 200 years old. So in Texas, I thought you can talk about beginnings. So anyway, this is all printed in England. It was cooked up from a drawing of mine, an A1 drawing, which was photographed and then scanned, and then printed in Skelmersdale into 2 foot by 8 foot long strips in the old money. It had a number on each, salvage, and we sent it off to Toronto. There are 2 blokes carrying one, and they wrapped it around 1-inch fiberglass tiles, and then they put it up in 2 days in Texas. And what am I doing wrong? The top one, is it? No. That one. Okay. So St. Augustine of Hippo, which is actually a place rather than an animal, wrote, God before he made anything made nothing. That was a very clever move, because I thought, okay, so what do you start with? Because you know, I was going to in Texas, you find a whole unfired Apollo rocket lying in the grass. I mean, it's just amazing. It's all made of incredibly expensive metal because of the pressures it had. And I was trying to calculate how many dollars it spent as it rose into the air. So I did a drawing of nothing up there. And then I thought, well, what do I do next? You know, now that I've got nothing. And I thought, well, everything comes into your mind with its opposite. So what's the opposite of nothing? And I thought, there's something, everything there. They're not as heavy as nothing. If you put nothing in a scale, there's nothing as heavy as nothing. You know, it's really heavy stuff. So I drew another nothing. And then I thought, well, what if these nothings got to know themselves? That's it, you see. There's one nothing, there's the other nothing. And this is this sort of cigar band. They got to know each other. And so there was a catastrophe. So being is the negation of nothing, which I think is quite logical, really. Because how do you develop nothing? Now, this is merely pictorial demonstration of nothing. The architecture is so brilliant that you can actually walk into nothing. I'll show you how to do it. Anyway, and also it was all free, you see, because this chap Steve, he did electronic check cashing, and so he gave $100,000 to me at a power breakfast. I said I'd like some art, you know, and this happens because actually boys like giving girls presents, you see. And so these things are free. Okay, and this is my dear wife. After I lost my practice, I wish I would tell you how, but it was one of those things. It was a Solomonic choice. I had to either wreck my building, which actually was the judge, or wreck my practice. But I wasn't going to struggle because I had found a client finally in America, in Texas, who wanted me to script the ceiling, who wanted me to do a meaning, even a simple one, like, you know, what happened in the beginning. So there it is. That's the book. It's so heavy, I forgot to bring it, but a friend of mine is bringing it up tomorrow. He's coming to the tour in the Judge tomorrow morning. So I will leave a copy of it. It weighs more than 4 kilograms. It's three volumes. It took me 17 years to write, not continuously, but I wanted to write a handover from the modernism of meaningless to a modernism of meaning. Oops, come on. Okay, and here we are at the Judge. This is how it was when we began. Now, David Watkin got it listed because, of course, the university wanted to knock it down and turn it into a car park, which is, of course, a sensible thing to do. All this was demolished at the back. The red was the only part that was left. And on the top, there was 20th century. This is all 19th century. And the 20th century was built to accommodate the wounded from the First World War. But Simon Sainsbury wanted it all just knocked off. So this is the best that my dear colleagues, my peers could do, because the pharmaceutical people had preserved this for their dead cats. It was a dustbin store. This is what we did, you see. We built on the dead cats department. We built the castle on that, and we put the ark in here, where the professors go in 2 by 2. That's the ark, you see. We got 2 floors of ark to 1 of Nightingale ward. They're huge wards, they're huge ceilings. And we got this one by lowering the floor by 450 millimeters, which doesn't show very much. So, and this has all been rebuilt now in stage 2. So this is we put a roof garden up here. It's actually got a German construction that enables you to grow grass. And the secretary said, no problem, we'll mow the grass. But Cambridge Maintenance said no way. So we paved it over. And here, this is the dead cats here. You can see the dead cats don't need very big windows. And these are 2 lecture theatres. We hung the top lecture theatre into the bottom lecture theatre, because you can do all sorts of funny things with modern construction. And here's the hospital being demolished. This is where the castle was built. And so this is how I managed to save this top floor, which is very posh accommodation. I think it's the highest accommodation in the area, probably. But I just put a cornice on it, you see, because architects didn't put cornices on things, and I call them an entablatura. And it has the reputation of having run over budget, which is a little bit complicated, but the fact is the contract was let underfunded, and there were certain people coming in to fund it as it went along. Sainsbury did, but his other partner didn't. Okay, and this is what I was developing for a long time. Apart from the robot order, it struck me that color was a characteristic, of course, of all ancient architectures, and color is meaning. What I worked with a sculptor, and we were working on the ceiling, and it was black and white, and you could see the shapes were quite interesting. It consisted of snakes and babies. Now, as soon as you colored them, they became snakes and babies, and then you were much more interested in the meaning. That what were the snakes and babies doing, going round and round the ceiling? And so color introduces meaning, which is why people are frightened of it, because they don't know what meanings to do, or they're frightened of the meanings anyway. So I call it photolithic. And technically, of course, it's extremely simple. It's just whites, you use white cement and pigment. And it was all made in Dublin, actually, and just arrived in low loaders. Right, so here's the cornice, which was just plonked on the roof. You see, this actually is the unchanged top floor. And then we put this bed of leaves and ashes, which you have to do if you're making a sacrifice. But these were not, the top floor is the Attica. Now, in Italy, when they really valued something, they gave it a Greek name. So they call the top floor the Attica, but it's also called the Belvedere, the Belvedere. This is the raft, you see. Raft comes from the meaning of the Latin trabeated architecture. You know, there's trabeated architecture, mural architecture, arcuated architecture, but trabeated architecture is a bit mysterious. It comes from trabeca, which is the Latin for raft. So that's why I call it the raft of reason, because it's quadrated, it's square, you see, which is what you do when you try to reason with something. And the important thing is that it carries a cargo. You know, that's what rafts do. You put a cargo on them and they float about and fly about. Another of my favorite authors, Indra McEwen. She wrote a wonderful book. It was her PhD. Everybody hits their top gear in PhDs. It was called Socrates' Ancestor. It was published by MIT. And it's brilliant because it talks of the entablature flying around, and it talks of the peripteral temple as being like a ship with oars. Anyway, so we'll come to that. Okay, so this is actually this is Donaldson's. This here is Donaldson's coin of the Temple of Ephesus. But you can see how brilliant it is, because by reducing everything to a tiny compass, the ionic capital turns into my logs, my tubes, you see. Anyway, so what I wanted to show here is this thing, which is entabled. It's on a table. That's what it means. A tablatum. The tablinum is the little building on the roof where you keep the portraits of your ancestors. And the entablature comes from tablatum as well as gravica. And it's a table, you see. It's a planked surface. Anyway, so you see, what is this? So I call it the big idea. But in the 18th century, after the Illuminismo, after the Enlightenment, where is it, you see? This is architecture being shown by the muse. It's gone. Shock. But here it's come back, you see. This is why the pumping station is rather attractive. It's brought back the big idea, whatever it is. There it is. It's a 10-foot propeller. I was giving a lecture in Belfast University, and I knew Belfast had this metal bashing tradition. They built the Titanic and they built Saunders Roe seaplanes. And anyway, so I went to a place called the Sirocco Fan Company, which built actually gigantic heat exchangers. And I showed them a picture, because I used to be a pilot in the Air Force, and I showed them a picture of this thing, which is a very simple sort of fan propeller thing. And I said, could you build this? Oh, no problem, sir. So they gave me a price, and I took it to our engineers, who were very, very clever engineers. They built dams in Africa and things like that. They said, oh, yeah, that's all right. We'll put a little fan behind that to blow the air out. They were going to fix it, you see. So I wrote back to the Sirocco Fan Company and I said, if the fan was going around at 16 RPM, which is the old gramophone turntable, how much air would it push? So they told me. So I took the letter to the engineers, and they said, "Oh, yes, sir, you can have that fan. That's excellent." So the engineers in the 19th century, they knew what would work and they just made it. But today they want documentation. So here we are. This is what everybody's been waiting for, the ancient Indian cosmogony. This was a little book, which I can't find actually. I downloaded this from the internet. You can get it downloaded. But it was given to me by my landlady, actually, who was Australian and used to pass by Indonesia, because Kuiper is from Leiden University and was doing research in Indonesia on Hindu cosmogonies. So, but as an excuse, I quote Diderot, who said the great symbols are inexhaustible. So you can use them, you can do anything you like with them because they're inexhaustible. You can't kill them. You can't kill the mountains and the rivers and the sun and trees and things like that. So it's open season on the great symbols. So this is what in this Vedic cosmogonies, and the Hindus wear it as a red spot on their forehead. I think it's called the Bindu. I think it's called the Bindu. Well, I just call it the idea, the big idea, the spark. It's got a hole in it in my picture. And of course, the spark, you see, because it's this is actually this is the phenomenology of the SARS project. A project, as Hannah Arendt proposes, just starts with a vision, with a thought, with whatever it is. But you have to keep it warm, you see, and so you encase it in a cone of ashes. According to the Vedic cosmogony, it's set forth on a nest of twigs, which is a good enough description of a raft. It's set forth on the Sea of Chaos. So here it is on the balustrade of the Judge building. I just put it on the Judge building. There's the Sea of Chaos up there in blue concrete. Blue concrete, blue is the most expensive pigment. I mean, it's really not very expensive, but it is the most expensive pigment because blue is it's made of cobalt. I got some bricks made from cobalt in Holland because they make amusing bricks in Holland, and I always tell people they glow in the dark. And here's the raft. Here's the cone of ashes. I like to think of the cone of ashes as the Greeks. The first person the Greeks sacrificed to was Hestia, the goddess of the hearth. Hestia actually never did anything. She just was. And she has no history as far as I can see. But I'm sure people here will correct me on that. So anyway, that was there. And these are the big planters. Okay, so here's another way of looking at it. Here's the raft setting forth over the Sea of Chaos, carrying the cone of Hestia with the germ, with the spark, with the speck in it. Now it senses it's actually looking for something, according to the Vedic cosmogony. It's looking for the submarine mountain. When it does detect it under it is submarine, it gets very excited and bursts into flames. So here's the submarine mountain. Now the submarine mountain is guarded by the serpent Vrtra, and Vrtra is actually cyclic time. So cyclic time just goes on and on. Who is it who talks about cyclic time? I'll remember in a minute. My brain isn't very fast. Yes, anyway. So what happens is that I think of these. This is the primordial column, actually. The primordial column isn't a prop, like somebody put in the jaws of a crocodile to keep it open. It's actually something lowered into the submarine mountain, into the I call this the heap of history. It's everything that's ever been. And that's why I do it in black and white stripes, because it's days and nights. And what happens is and I also think of this as an injection of capital. Gold bars, you see, that's why I do them gold. And what the terrible thing that happens is that cyclic time is turned into eschatological or linear time. So this is actually the story of the Garden of Eden, which we'll come to later. Because in the Garden of Eden, nothing ever happens. And then God drives out Adam and Eve, and they enter, in fact, eschatological time, the time of beginning and ending, of being created, of being born and dying. And that's the time of history, which actually is a good deal more interesting than the Garden of Eden. Okay, there's the heap of history. Very compelling drawing. But the point is that the raft of reason comes upon it only from the will of the gods, because the raft can't be steered, you know. I have a nice picture of Odysseus' raft. Because, you know, Odysseus really didn't know where the hell he was going. He just ended up there. And this is the serpent Vritra. Okay, and this is the shower in the practice restroom, bathroom. Because I thought, and this is how we began, you see, this is a vertical ontogeny. These are apparently one of our beginnings, one of our supposed beginnings, or no doubt scientifically justified, was as marine worms with a light-sensitive cell in one end that turned into eyes. And you notice there's a daddy worm, mummy worm, and a baby worm. And this is the amphibian stage, you know, when you breathe and your body goes pink, becomes oxygenated. So this is the individual, and speech or breath is represented as the flags of truce. Hermes is white ribbons, and the whole thing is carved out of a broken open mountain, and this is the interpenetration of matter and light, soul and body. So this is another drawing of the similar arrangements, which one of our Ollie Wainwright called splat. I always draw everything. It's the only way I can understand it. And this is the columna lucis, which I draw as a Phillips screw. And here is my best client, really, was Marek Rousing. She's got dementia rather badly, apparently. But so she wanted something to mark the millennium in her house. So this is what I did for her. I did gestation down here, being born here, taking the first breath, opening the eyes, and thinking, and all supporting. Because what happens is, although the columns descend from the flying or floating entablature, there's also an upward movement when the Bindu and the submarine mountain, which contains the black sun, that's a bit of Zoroastrianism I popped in. But there's then the generative process where there's an upward narrative to carry, in fact, what is the cultural superstructure, which I will now demonstrate. Okay, here's gestation. these are little lumps of black polished marble, and this is blue concrete, which is treated. You should always cover the concrete with clear lacquer, because that stops the cement being eaten by our acidic atmosphere, which produces a lovely shiny boiled sweet look, which I like. But most people want buildings to achieve a sort of patina of age, which I don't necessarily desire. But there it is. Cement is on my style, on my side. So this lump, this is, I call the lotus, and this is the amphibious stage. You can see here the bits of blue cobalt brick that the Dutch, I smashed them up. You see, I only smash up very high quality bricks. Because they eventually, you see, bricks, concrete shrinks and bricks expand, or they stay where they are. So actually blitzcrete is a very stable material. It's not going to, bricks actually expand. There are quite a lot of post-war buildings where the bricks were put into a concrete frame, and catastrophes occur. Lots of cheap blocks of flats came to grief like that. So this is the first breath. And you can see here that these are real columnar luces. This is a borosilicate glass chemistry laboratory tube, which I've reduced to the world of the rainwater pipe. And this is the window, this is the door that you get into the electric stuff. I mean, it's all very simple, really. None of my stuff is high-tech. It's all household. It's all house builders stuff. And that's why it's cheap. Because you can get a good quote if lots of people can tender for it. And here is this is a funny drawing of what I call the ocean of the voice. I've got another drawing where the sea departs and it's kind of a phenomenology of birth, but it's actually taken from a book written about Rome, published by Wasmuth. I think it was written by a Danish, huge fat book like that, where he talks of the streets being carved by departing water. Anyway, it's metaphorically very accurate, but and here is this is this is a phylogeny. This is a history of the human phylum, or the mammalia phylum, and also ontogeny, because we reproduce whenever we have whenever we generate another human, we actually pass through all the stages of the evolution of the species. So this is the most expensive part. This is lead crystal. We only ended up with 2, but we made 4 because it's 100 millimeters thick and incredibly difficult to cool down, to anneal. But Marit wanted it, and as she said to me, she said, when you have the sort of money we have, you have to achieve the best, which I think is quite noble of her. She also said, I want my house to be completely original, but to look as if it's always been there. She was a really brilliant client, actually. She took 4 years to design the house before it even started. I thought it was a hobby. I used to go down there quarterly for lunch because Hans used to be a very good cook. So now this part, of course, this is thought. Oops. Oh no. I must have pressed something.
Are we going in the right direction?
Yeah, I must have pressed something a
We'll
bit.
just go on a little tour.
It's all right.
There we go.
It's sort of like a brainstorm. Okay, so Ricoeur says thought is always of something. I like, he's the only French philosopher I can understand, actually, because I turn all his thoughts into architecture. I bought his book in Fort Worth, I think. And in Barnes and Noble. Anyway, I read it in the rain in the hotel, very excited. So this is my image of thought, because this I can't produce a figure for thought. It's just a black capital, which is coupled to the head, and it's shiny and curved, you know, like outer space or something. But but you can see that the entablature, the trabeca, is full of light, comes out of the ends, you see, stainless steel. All this was made in Southampton. Yes, and it has a copper patinated cyma recta. This is a cyma recta molding, and there's the cavetto, which means Scotia. It's also called the Scotian molding because it means shadow. We'll come to that because it's to do with being out Scotland. So this is a space of appearances, you see. You also appear, but then you appear in any space. The important thing about the space of appearances is that something you think of appears as well. It is an epiphanic, it's a theatre of epiphanic reification. So again, the meaning is what matters. The meaning is what you build. The truth is incarnated in a shared space. You can touch it. I mean, I think it's important because I'm completely deracinated myself. I was born in Malaysia. My mother was born in Rosario, Argentina. My father was born in Kanpur, India. So I call myself a refugee of the Raj. This is the entablature on the judge. So this stuff in the middle here is the matrix of fiery and ineffable power, which I simply put as electric light in the other thing. Then the hollow members of the Ordine. So all this is the Ordine Roboticorum. I mean, the Ordine is the entablature and of course the columns. Now this green stuff here, Corbusier, you know, who put his stuff on Pilotti, he put the stuff on top. He called it the sol artificiel. He called it the artificial earth. It means art, really. It's a sort of, he's reinventing the earth, you see. Well, I wasn't so ambitious, really, but I thought I'd refer to it. So this is sort of green, it's some kind of green stuff. And then this is the cargo, the raft of reason. I made these stainless steel bolts because this paint on here, the guarantee lasts for 40 years if you wash it every year, which of course on the top of the judge they're not going to do, so the guarantee is void. But nevertheless, you can actually unbolt it all and send it back to the factory because there are only gutters. And then these are green glazed French tiles, because I call that the pyramid of the sea. And this is the pattern. I call it the Janus spiral because the ordinary spiral goes on spiraling, but this one straightens out, you see. But it's a non-repeating pattern, so I had to draw this whole thing out on a huge sheet of paper for the people to make it. And this is a rather more elaborate version. The iconolect of the 6th Ordine showing the primordial eros down here as a black disc below a cubic body. So this is actually derived from a cube with 6 sides. laced with fire and ice, with water in area, wing and supporting the Janus spiral, which is that it retreats to the inside. It retreats to inside, and then it goes out. And when it goes out, it goes out into the unknown. And this is another drawing you see, which shows the entablature. It's guided towards the heap of history by ciphers, by mysterious information that it gathers as it wanders about, and this is its cargo. You see, its cargo is everything, and these are sort of, you can think of the Janus spiral as eyes. They're looking down for something. Actually, they're looking down for the heap of history, but they're also looking down. I call this drawing the voyage of the valley. The rafter reason is quadrated, therefore rational. It's called the quadratura in Italian architecture. It carries the idea of fiery golden germ within the pyramid. Oh, I didn't say, you see that the pediment is a pyramid, and pira means fire in Greek. So it is a cone of ashes. Pyramid, pediment, cone of ashes. Its gaze is downwards. It seeks the mirror of its ideal. This is the ideal community or Hellenic polis, as painted by Claude and described by Glotz, as an isolated river valley. So this is what it's looking for. You see, it's carrying around its image. There it is. Right. Here's a map of Greece, and that's its geography. And if you look at the drowned river valleys that Glotz mentions, each one is a separate city-state. I mean, the city, in this case, it's called a polis, and it actually is the whole valley. It's the whole population of the valley. The actual city that we think of as a city is just the center of the valley. This is an Islamic version of it, which goes down from the sea, you see, up to some sort of mountainous summit. And this is a Hindu version of it. You've got this tank here, and the shikara, whatever that tall thing is there. But the normal architect, he's given a site, you see, and it's just a bit of flat mud. And so he's thinking, well, what do I do with this flat mud here? This is what I really want, you see. I really want this beautiful valley with a river running down it and everything, and sheep everywhere. This is a slight diversion, which won't last very long. Lefkalion and Pyrrha were the Greek Adamic. What were they called in the Hebrew version?
Noah's Ark.
Sorry?
Noah's Ark.
Yes, it's Noah's Ark. Anyway, they were told by Zeus that he was going to wipe the whole human race out with a flood. So they built an ark, and when they landed, Zeus sent Themis, who was a goddess of sort of order, you know, and she said, well, you've done very well. You've survived. What would you like as a prize, you see? And being Greek, they thought, well, actually kind of boring, you know, without all the Greeks here. So they asked for the Greeks to come back. So Themis said, well, cover your heads and throw the bones of your mother behind you. So the bones of their mother was actually stones. So they threw stones behind. And in my story, his stones turned into Doric columns, and her stones turned into Ionic, which is all a bit silly, really. But this is the real stuff. I got this from what was his name? My brain isn't working. Oh yes, here it is, George Hershey. George Hershey kindly invited me to stay with him in his beautiful house which is all made of wood, like American houses, and surrounded with trees, in the campus of Yale. And he wrote this book called Pythagorean Palaces, and it shows Sebastiano Serlio's proposition that the origin of architecture was the hypostyle hall columns. Well, this couldn't possibly be the Council of Athens. The columns are all shifted around so that you can actually see the speaker. So the only people meeting here are columns, but that's all right. Okay, here's a similar sort of thing, the upper dharma of Persepolis. And Ipo means sort of below, before, and stilion is the column. So the hypostyle is the columns that were before the columns or below them. So we're talking of a forest of buried columns. Now, one of my clients, sadly dead now, of the Egyptian house, Henrietta McCall, she said Idinu was the orchard in the Deshret. The Deshret is Egyptian for the red land, which means the desert. So you can't have an orchard in the desert. So the Garden of Eden is whatever you think it is. My story about the origin, this is how you walk about in nothing. This is like the story of Conan Doyle's Lost World. You're flying across a trackless forest, a vast Amazonian forest, and you're forced down. And so, but what you find as you escape from the broken aeroplane is that all the trees are exactly the same, like the hypostyle. And so wherever you walk, nothing changes. It's always the same. So there's no before and no after. And you would definitely go mad in a place like that, because there would be no passage of time. It's that what is it called? The Groundhog Day. So and then one of you steps into a puddle. So you suddenly see in your mind the whole stream running down to the sea. So this is the metaphor I use for the beginning of time. That this is infinitude. So you can build, when you build a hypostyle, you build infinity, you build timelessness. And then you introduce, and this is what Claude painted over and over again. The Claude's paintings, there's always a bridge guarded by towers. There's a building you can't get into. There it is, you see. And it all goes down. He looks into the sun and he looks down to the sea. And there's not a lot going on. And this absolutely fascinated the British Milordi. They bought these whenever they could, and then they turned them into country house parks. Now, what was Claude doing? This is on the left, Archimboldo. To me, Claude was painting architecture as nature, but you could also say that he was, and this I'll get through very quickly. This is the Olympic site. The whole site was dug up and cindered because there was Japanese knotweed everywhere. This is my version. Nobody asked me to design a city, sadly. So I decided I would do it myself. And this is the story from the Nymphaeum down to the Delta. And also these things, which I've now renamed as bunker blocks. They're city blocks of about 100 families, but they have a garden at the second floor with 6 foot of earth. And there's now obviously got to be a new chapter on the British, on the modernist Vitruvius, which is called military architecture, because, you know, everything is on the front line now. I mean, with kamikaze drones. So the Lee Canal was, I wanted to just keep the Lee Canal as a wildlife corridor. So this is my final design. This is what I would promote as a city. Anyway, we've got time for that. And this is my sketch of a cathedral. You can see the apse up at the top, the delta down at the bottom, the west front, you know, with the bridge. And this is, you see, the thing is, what's so fascinating is that the typical London house reproduces this, what I call the, I got it out of Claude, the river of somatic time, the phenomenology of a life from birth, where you give birth up in the attic, down to the delta here, which is the front door, see? And it has all these stages in between, which you can no doubt study in my book at leisure. So this is, you know, the Doric, the Corinthian, the Gothic, the modern, and poof. Because the modern architect is terribly proud if he's got rid of all the columns. He loves, and actually it's crazy financially, because floors are not designed for strength. They're designed for sag, for bounciness. Nobody wants to walk about, you know, that famous wobbly bridge. Actually, I had to tolerate the engineer of it on one of my buildings. He's absolutely brilliant and really dangerous. Typical Cambridge type. So this is the girl who's laughing because all the boys' toys have been put away. And here are the boys all going in there. And there's the architect who has no brain, you know, but he draws things. And there's his dustbin full of high tech. So this is my Vitruvius. Firmitas is just all the machinery, which includes the structure. I always had a problem with a structural engineer, because structural engineers are used to set out the building from their columns. I had to explain to them that my buildings are set out from the Ordine, and their structure is just, you know, one pipe. I call them props, actually, not columns. Columns are reserved for my stuff. Now, commoditas comes from modus. It's a Latin word meaning measure. The first thing a client gives an architect is his schedule of accommodation, which is a political statement. Who's going to have the big office? Who's going to have the little one? Who's going to be near the coffee machine? Who's going to be near the loo? And then venustas is actually information. So I call it the working column, the walk-in column, I'm sorry about that, and the talking column. So this is why I'm always very disappointed when I don't get decoration, because decoration is regarded as a sin in England. It's called decadent. Yeah, that's the usual adjective reserved for decoration. If only it was. Now, this is how I cope with a big building. I draw it out with colored fountain pens against a grid of bricks, because bricks are wonderful materials. You can lift them, they have a nice scale, and they're very long-lasting. They're ceramic, for God's sake. I mean, they last much longer than concrete and steel or anything like that. So I put a brick, and so I don't have to dimension anything, because everybody knows what size a brick is. So I just draw it all out with colored fountain pens. I bought the first one in a curiosity shop in Houston. They're made in Paris, and they just drill out a acrylic barrel, and you fill it with a you know, a chemistry shop, Idrip, I think, yes. And so red is metal, and blue is concrete. There's cast concrete and precast concrete. Obviously the insulation comes from earlier days. It would be a lot fatter now, and that's you know, it's very banal construction. But the point is that the chap that used to publish Blueprint, he asked me to come to have some coffee in the RIBA. And he said, John, you're the only architect I know whose buildings look exactly like your drawings. So I said to him, isn't that what drawings are for? But the fact is that a lot of work now is divided between the design architect, who's a kind of star, and the bureau d'études, as it's called in France. And these are the robot columns of the big gallery. This is what you're climbing up, because you can climb all the way up them to the top. So I just go around the whole building with fountain pens and issue what I call the construction philosophy of the collection, you know. And the team just tries to get as close as they can, but at least they know what they're doing instead of going off somewhere else, which architects are very inclined to do. So these are drawings, more accurate drawings of the robot columns produced by the service engineers. And here are the different sorts of robot columns. These are the ones for the castle up here. And those are the ones for the ark. And you can see the ones for the gallery are much bigger. And actually the bricklayers quite enjoyed all that patterning and stuff. You know, they're human after all. Oops. So we'll have to speed up a bit. Yes, here are the gallery columns. We found rather conveniently an underground duct, which linked all we linked all the columns together. And so here in the arc, you see, we kept the floor to ceiling height down because we just put all the pipes. You know, normally you have this wretched suspended ceiling, so this is how the concrete is made. It's just cast, and this is what they ought to do to Eddington actually, because this is a client who bought these. He was in fact a history graduate from Cambridge who wanted his own empire, and he made it with a central heating company, and this is what we did. He wanted a glass box because he knew that was what modern architecture was, you see. But his finance director and his technical director were very happy with what we did, which is we just took the frame and wrapped cheap brick around it. I mean, this cost a third of what the glass box would have cost. And we put a pitch roof on it because his roof was leaking. And that was it. And you can see we kept all the landscaping exactly as it was. So that's all you have to do if you've got a horrible building with leaking, a flat roof and no architecture on it at all. And this is all the stuff we put in the robot columns. But when you come inside, of course, these big columns. I mean, this is Mary Rousing's house in Wadhurst. The big columns, as you can see, there's one. You see, it's vanished. And what we did, we replaced them with a beam of light, because this is what this means. You see, this is Dr. Spock who says, "Beam me up, Scotty." Now, beam is etymologically related to being. Actually, you have, and it occurs in descriptions of trees like hornbeam and whitebeam. But Scott Osselman in modern Greek means let's take him away and kill him. Let's take him to the shadows Scotia. The Scotia molding is the molding that casts the shadow. So what he is saying is take me to the shadows and bring me back to life in another place. So this is what we did here. You see, when we took away the physical column, we put back columns of light, beams of light. This is in the entrance hall. We had time. This is 365 days. Lunar months, 13 lunar months, 24 hours, and so on. And these were turbines that drove you through the house. And these, oh, well, we've seen this one already, but this is you see, when you put these things, this is the missing column. This is the column that you notice in a way. And then these were early days, and then they grew into a green thing. Because we must have the green. And this was in Texas. We made holes in the roof, and they gathered the sunlight in these tall chairs, and then they came out at the bottom. So you walked through chambers, which were chambers of being. And this is a three-story version of it, of the walk-in common. Now, this is a drawing by a member of staff, Tanya.
Hunter. Hunter,
Yes?
Hunter, Tanya Hunter.
Yes, Tanya Hunter. She's Russian. Russians do amazing watercolors. Poor things, that's all they ever did, actually. But anyway, she drew, and the Texans. I mean, I told you the story of this where somebody said, "Oh, so I decided to do the roof first because you can't. It's rather difficult to do it when the building is useful." But at the meeting where I presented this, they said, "Oh, John, why did you have 70,000 to do the floor? Because these are all Texan marbles. They have a wonderful sienna yellow." And so I did the delta on the floor, and we never got around to doing the columns, but they were. I wrote my book after I'd done that ceiling because I proved that you didn't have to cut yourself off from the past to be modern. That's all I wanted to prove, that you could be modern and part of the sixth, whatever it is, 9,000-year history. And there wasn't a problem. And here we are at Downing. So at this point, you see Hans Rausing, who was then the richest man in the world, according to the Sunday Times. The only reason he was rich is he wouldn't sell any shares in his company. Hans was a man of principle, you see. He said, if you own a company, you should run it. And if you run it, you should own it. And he fulfilled that. Because eventually he sold his company and landed his clever children with the job of investing £4 billion, which actually is a lot more difficult than just running a company that makes paper boxes full of milk. So anyway, he gave $250,000 on behalf of Marriott and this is the roof that I put on. This is my last job. Marriott said, I want a roof where we can have 250 people dining in here after they watch Sussex Opera. And I don't want the roof to drip because previously it was just a steel roof with plastic sheeting. So this is the most expensive job I've ever done. I can't even remember the price. But it's all those structural members are heated with hot water. And it's 3 sheets of glass covered in amazing chemicals, which actually, the place is cooler. When it's in the summer, it's a cold house, actually. That's why it has these monocotyledon ferns. Anyway, there's another story there. So I set off on my own, really, because obviously the whole point of my architecture as to make its meaning explicit. And the cheapest way to do that is to decorate these columns. So I started off, and Sainsbury said to me, "Oh, John, the columns are split up horizontally." So I said, "Okay, that's a good idea." So these are a bit heavy. Now, of course, you see, in the Judge, all the money is spent. I mean, all the plaster, they're A3 size plaster tiles, curved, and they're all up there. Here are a couple of the staff holding up. These are photocopies that are transferred. The pigment is transferred to the surface. So I said, okay, what we'll do is we'll have an entrance. We'll have another pattern for the entrance, another pattern for the staircase, another pattern for the whole enclosure. We'll have a south column and a north column. You see, this green thing is the underground duct, which ties it all together. And this is the major computer room. So then I started to invent these spatial things. And I took Athanasius Kirk, who's a very interesting character, and he put a sunflower in a paper boat and it tracked the sun. So I took the yellow petals of the sunflower and the water and the rays of the sun, and I produced this pattern. And then I did what's called an interference pattern. The results were very, very pleasing to me. So the interference pattern, once it's tiled onto the A3 tiles, produces about 3,000 individual compositions. I thought, well, I'm going to put the art business out of, the art business out of business. But I took 4 of the more amusing. Now, this is quite interesting in the context of AI, because AI actually, what this does is it's called aleatory. It's accidental. These patterns are accidents. I'm not sure if an aleatory program can produce an accident or a joke. But this just happens, you see. Anyway, so this is what the big columns turned into, you see, and these were some of the individual tiles down here. But it was a first, actually. They gave the money back. The thing is that Judge really didn't like anything that was going on. I mean, he wanted an office block with a glass roof. That was the sort of boy he was. And he said, Greek gods and goddesses over my dead body. Well, he's dead now. So, and Sainsbury really didn't like decoration, actually. I heard from Colin Amory, who was a great friend of mine, that Venturi flew in for a site meeting at the National Gallery extension, and he wouldn't even go to the site meeting. He sent his wife instead. I met her actually at the opening of the because we were interviewed for that job. We didn't get it because I refuse to work if I'm not paid. I just don't work for them. I mean, I believe in the importance of money. I didn't do anything for them for the interview. I just showed them my stuff. Anyway, so there it is, you see. And this is the last slide. This is why I think it is important politically at the present time to take note of this mystery, the public. One has to obtain their respect. I mean, the Cambridge Evening News was so annoyed at the way that my peers treated the judge. They gave it a prize for chutzpah from the ROD. So he ran a competition. He got architects, he got a panel of architects to choose the five best buildings in the last 10 years, because this is a competition for a deceased city planner called Irwin. But then he surprised this architectural panel, because they chose some nice buildings, one of which happened to be the judge. And he gave the choice over to the public through some system of phone-ins and write-ins and I don't know what. And he told me at this ceremony that the judge got more votes than the others. Well, I recorded this, but I mean the point is that maybe they were born there or something in the hospital, who knows. But I would really like this job finished, and I'm sure I can find the money for it, for the decorations, and it would just mean, column by column, the columns being, it's a transfer technique. You just transfer a photocopy onto the panels, which are already there, and you just have a couple of art students up there, earning an honest living. Go around the building. It would take possibly 9 months or something, but it wouldn't interfere with what's going on. And the result would be very startling. Because it's important to impress, our policy in architecture has been to just give people the physiology, but you have to respect, you have to respect the meanings. You have to give them something that means something. Anyway, so that's yes.